Hey there, my name is Rachael and welcome to the Magdala podcast. We at Magdala know from experience that pornography, masturbation, and other sexual addictions are not just a guy problem. The need for women to be accompanied in a journey towards healing from addiction has gone sorely unmet, and that's why we're here. Magdala exists as a space where women can find hope, healing, and freedom alongside each other from sexual addiction. Our goal is to supply you with support, community, and accountability. Here on the podcast, you'll find everything from testimonies to practical advice to dialogue about how to heal and live fully as a Catholic woman. Wherever you are in your journey, know that you're not alone, and we welcome you to this table. Oh man, I had a cold last week, and so drinking a milkshake on top of the cold is probably not the greatest. Also, the Chick-fil-A line today, let me tell you, I'm not the only person who's not fasting from sweets for Lent, because everybody was in the Chick-fil-A line today at 3:30, everyone. So
that's the place to be.
I know, it truly was. It took me a good 20 minutes to get through Chick-fil-A, and I was like, even with all of their beautiful God-given efficiency, they were still slowing me down. But the milkshake is here. Oh man. Okay. Folks, we have Annie Hayen back. I'm not going to say hi in this time because I got it wrong.
No, you did good. You did good.
I got it wrong the first time, and I still feel sad about that. Okay, but we're going to talk about relapse today. And Annie threw this out there. What was it, last week? Did you message me last week? And we were like, yeah, let's just record this on Tuesday.
Good. Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually a topic that I've been thinking we need to cover. And I want to make sure we cover it well. We may end up doing several episodes revisiting this topic, but for now I have Annie with me to talk about relapse. Because we both, I think, share an irritation based on what you've said, Annie, so far in our conversation, with testimonies not being realistic about relapse. Always, when you have a testimony on addiction, obviously the glory should be given to God. The focus should end with Him. It should be something hopeful and motivating. But I do rarely hear testimonies on addiction that include relapse. Or just say, you have this pivotal experience and then it's over. It's like, well, no, things last after. And I mean, when I've shared my story, I've actually noted that I need to share this pivotal spiritual experience I have and then say that it did not end after that. It wasn't over. The journey wasn't over. And the journey is technically never over for any of us. So the ramblings have begun, but do you have a relapse story or experience that comes to mind, Annie, that's particularly illustrative of what we're going to talk about today?
Yeah, I think so. And before I share, just agreement to what you just said. I remember I was leading a retreat, I think 3 years ago now, and it's the retreat, everyone was just sharing their testimony. That was the talk they would give. And after sharing my talk for the first time with my leadership team, it was the feedback I received right away was like, this is great. Talk about the relapse or the recovery or the in-between. And I think that was the first time I was confronted with why it's so hard to talk about. And I recognize that it's the most important part of my story to talk about. And yet there's almost this sense of it happens so often. Some people's story is they relapse once and then they're completely free. Mine was not. It was years of continually feeling better, restored, stable, whatever words you want to use,
right,
and then relapsing again. And I think that's why it was hard to describe, if I could describe it on the surface, and then I'll share a specific example, but describing it on the surface, recovery is messy. It is usually not fun. It's usually a lot more failure than success. I'm a softball player, so anyone who plays softball or baseball, they talk about that sport in particular is a lot more failure than success. Mm-hmm. I'm batting around 300 right now. That means 7 out of 10 times I am not getting hit. means I'm failing 7 out of 10 times, and I'm considered a good batting average, right? And so if I talk about my story, I was probably batting maybe maybe 200 on a good day. And so that's recognizing that there was more failure than success for a large part of my story. And so I think, yeah, the one I'll share is, so I was in maybe my sophomore year of college. I, at this point, I'll call myself free pornography for about 6 months, but I'll use that language just in saying that I hadn't masturbated in about 6 months time frame. So I felt like, again, I felt this sense of I had defeated this.
Sure.
Notice language that it was me, that I was victorious. And it ended up being a day like, I don't have to get into all the details, but there was a lot of volleyball stress, a mean coach. I was feeling very insecure for reasons. There was this guy, I really wanted his attention and he wasn't giving it to me. And long story short is I then ended up again in my room. Nobody was there. And I fell. And I remember crying for probably an hour, for a few reasons. One, I just felt so stupid because I felt holier than thou. I felt higher than this. I thought I had control over it. And so I was very quickly humbled to recognize my weakness. I was secondly just so scared at how fast it all came. Something that, there was probably a month time frame in there that I rarely even thought about it, that it got to a point where I wasn't really actively fighting anything. And then I fell back into it, which was scary to just know that part is still there. And then I think the other thing was that I, at this point in my life, had told multiple people about it as a past issue. So it was very scary to be faced with the reality that it's still a current thing.
Right.
And I, at this point, was, leading a women's ministry. I was leading Bible studies. I was sort of at the place of mentorship. And so I, probably for a few days post this relapse, like I was just off. Like I wouldn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Go back to my room alone. I felt so ashamed. I didn't want people to look at me. If I did talk to someone, I would put on the fakest, like, smile and laugh, like, everything's amazing, when I was just, like, crying on the inside. And so I think something I'll share and then I'll ask you about, too. I think one of our questions should always be, what is relapse? Isn't relapse,
Yes.
right? And so what is relapse is, yes, I fell again. What is not relapse? My whole life is over and I'm now back at square one.
Right.
Rachel, what is relapse and what isn't relapse?
Yeah, so relapse is understood as when, just on a psychological level, when an addictive or compulsive behavior has been arrested. Okay, so the term arrested just meaning it no longer claims the frequent or daily life of an addict, right? So you've said no to triggers, you've moved on from being compulsive, like those sorts of things, and you have a period of freedom. And that period can look different for everybody. That's what's so difficult about defining it too. What relapse is not like, I'm free for a week and then I'm done, or then I fall again. Like it's, and the short spurts of time, like you should be in a somewhat significant period of freedom, which is, for some people that's 3 months, for some people that's 6, for some people it's a year, right? I always found like, ironically, but not so ironically, my 2 relapses in college were the day before I was giving a talk on pornography addiction. So I think, and you and I spoke more about this before pressing record, but yeah, I remember one happened junior year and one happened at the beginning of senior year. And they were isolated. They were one time, which I'm very grateful for, that they didn't continue or spiral into a pattern. Because relapse sometimes means one time, and then relapse also can mean you enter into active addiction again. It spirals. But I remember feeling, and I think this is what the enemy wanted me to feel, is like, yeah, so you can't give your talk tomorrow, or like, you can't start this ministry. Like, the one senior year was right before the big campus launch of our support groups for men and women.
Yeah.
So I was going to be publicly giving my testimony to a co-ed audience for the first time ever. I was incredibly nervous for obvious reasons. Yeah, and the first one, junior year, I remember feeling kind of the emotions you're describing. I felt awful. I was lethargic afterward. I felt terrible about myself, and didn't want to talk to anyone. Felt like a liar. I felt like such a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And then after an extended period of prayer, was able to kind of get out of that, head to confession, and move forward. The second one, senior year, I absolutely went to confession, but it was really beautiful because right after it happened, I had my journal, like my prayer journal nearby. I'm a big prayer journaler. And I grabbed it and immediately opened it and was just like, Lord, I cannot believe I just did this. Like, what the heck? And then just very quickly realized, and my husband reminds me of this frequently, you know, the whole principle of like, never be surprised you sinned. Be surprised that you didn't sin more, right? And I very quickly felt that grace to be like, oh, like, I'm stressed about my talk tomorrow. Satan wants me to feel like a liar, and I gave in to believing this could satisfy my stress. And this is not who I am anymore. And I'm not going to let the lies of Satan come into this moment. So it ended up being a very powerful, merciful experience. And that was the last relapse experience I had. Again, I'm very grateful mine were isolated, but yeah, I think when we allow it, and I know you are touching on this and you want to get into this, when we allow it to be, relapse can be almost a necessary experience of God's mercy. And when we were talking earlier, you're avoiding that word. But why do you think relapse can be, you know, for lack of a better term, almost a necessary experience for someone in recovery?
Yeah, I think I'll share. Yeah, that word necessary I struggle with because obviously God doesn't want sin for our lives, right? God desires freedom for us. Jesus came that we may have
Right.
life to the full. So he has freedom for us, but he allows these spaces of falls for some purpose, for some space of humility, for some place of mercy, a combination of the two. But we can see in that God allows Jesus to fall 3 times when he's carrying his cross. Jesus didn't have to, but he did. And so God uses that. And we can say there's many reasons why, but we can say that there's a purpose in the fall when we're carrying some big cross. And so we can use that. I know a lot in my own life, and I know in yours talked about just how much pride took over my life.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I became free of this because I did all the right things and because I am so much stronger than this. And God very lovingly place in saying that you are not. It was a beautiful humility. When we're talking about relapse, another story I want to share that I was thinking of, I think most recently, so to be completely vulnerable, of it was about a year ago, and I at this point had entered into a romantic relationship with a guy I was dating at the time, and this was my first relationship with someone after about 3 years of not dating anyone, after 3 years of being free of doing, I'll say, anything sexual in relationships, and about 3 years of me publicly about,
Right.
I'll say, chastity with other people. And I'll tell you, chastity is a lot easier when no one there to do it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it was We were dating for about 6 months at that time, but long story short is I was going too far with him, and
Mm,
I sobbed for days. I could not believe. I have like journal and journal pages. You mentioned the journal, so that's why I thought of
right.
it. I journal and journal pages of I can't believe I'm stupid. I will never show my face again at my women's ministry meetings.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
Putting this guy on a pedestal for how amazing for me, and I'm still the same trash whatever that I have been, right? And I continue to just
Mm,
over myself, but to share what God allowed that moment for. Not only did he create a beautiful, I got to share at a retreat about it 2 months later of me just crying something I did, and it opened up other women's hearts. That was a
like the
grace.
whole retreat cried about this moment with you?
No,
I was like,
no,
wait, you glitched out for a second. I was like, what?
sorry. There was a retreat 2 months later that I got to
Oh,
where I was like the closing talk, and it was about how God wants to encounter us. And I use that as an example.
mm,
So much we talk about what we can do to encounter God. But the
right.
story that I love, it's in Exodus 19. God is only talking to Moses, and all the people are like, "We want to see God." And so God was like, "Okay, tell the people to prepare. I'm coming." And so after 3 days, God comes down the mountain in flame fiery fashion. And then the funny part is the people after are like, okay, tell God we don't want to see him anymore because we're scared, which is funny. But it's this sense that we don't have to climb up the mountain to meet God. God comes down the mountain to meet us. And so
Mm,
I use this story of me to share that I had never experienced such deep mercy. I mean, one, through my boyfriend at the time, in the way that he just looked at me with love and not with disgust.
praise God.
Through, through a priest I went to confession with 2 weeks later that I'm crying to him about, saying, I haven't done this in years, and
Mm,
him just telling me the Father's so proud of me for being here. The mercy I received in prayer next probably month was just exquisite, because every single day I went to prayer after in a place of humility of how much I needed the Father. And it
right.
was in that space I received more of God, more words of affirmation, more healing than I had in months prior, simply because I was able to come to him
Right.
so empty. And so there's a beauty of place of relapse really, I'll say, empties you, because you get to a
Yeah.
place, I am nothing again, right? Not nothing in a self hatred condemning sense, but recognizing that if God is everything, then I am literally nothing, that I can
Hmm.
do nothing on my own. Even Jesus says, I can do nothing except what the Father tells me to do. If
Yeah.
Jesus can do nothing without the Father, who the heck am I, Rachel, that
Right.
I can do this all on my own? And
Yeah.
so it really, yeah, that place for me to receive so much grace in prayer, so much mercy and healing that I would have never received. And I truly believe that I'm closer to Father now because of a moment like this. But
Yeah.
almost similar to what you shared about your experiences, that you were able to speak with deeper conviction and you were able to receive more affirmation because of that place of hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And um what you're getting at is like, yeah, a contentment with our poverty, right? Like we're so poor. And even now, I think this is why, especially like Magdala's leadership, we can never be the example or the blueprint of recovery for anyone, right?
Yeah.
We can give hope. That's what we're meant to be, is a testament of hope. But this is why no one woman's story can be, the pinnacle or the blueprint, is because like I am so poor. Like I am so full of crap sometimes. And just in the sexual realm, as a single person, I experienced such deep depravity, and now I'm in my marriage, it's been such a deep well of joy, but I believe it's been such a deep well of joy for my spouse and I because of my poverty and his poverty, and because of us recognizing how capable we are of messing this up. Always with each other, we're capable of messing it up still. Always will be, but that the Lord does not ask for anything but our poverty. Like, he asks for us to just surrender that emptiness, surrender that poverty, surrender that weakness, and be like, I'm the widow with one gold coin. That's all I got. This is my one gold coin. And he can do such incredible things with it. I think especially now, like expecting my first child, that's been such a testament to me of what like looking at my weakness, because, I'm blessed with a line of work that reminds me all the time how weak I am because I have to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But now recognizing sexuality was one of the most broken, wounded, depraved parts of my life. But it's where I'm getting my daughter or son. Are you kidding me? Like, look at that. Like, look at the goodness of God. And what he does with our one gold coin. So I think becoming content almost with that nothingness or that emptiness, and being able to receive the Lord there I think it is one of the protections from either further relapse or kind of entering back into a pattern of sin. But I do want to say, I find often with women in particular, because that's, the demographic we're blessed to work with, but in the feminine heart, there is that, like, during relapse, like, I didn't pray hard enough, or I don't love Jesus enough, or I didn't do this enough. That's like, hell yeah, you don't love Jesus enough. Like, that's okay. Neither do I, like, that's not the cause of your relapse, was that you weren't praying correctly, I don't think we can get too Pelagian about how we go about recovery and that I earn my freedom, right? Because that's still us thinking it's up to us. So when I say when I say preventing, right, like further relapse, or when we're talking about prevention or protections, this isn't you earning recovery. This isn't you earning freedom. This is things you can do to help yourself, right? The whole, saying heaven helps those who help themselves, which can get a little sketchy, but is sort of true. Like we're meant to, cooperate with our salvation. What are some other kind of protections that you've seen are helpful to you and to other women when pursuing recovery? I think humility's, like, that poverty is perhaps the biggest one. So even if you want to unpack that a little bit further, you're welcome to. But if there are others that you'd like to point out, I'd love to hear.
I wanted to just share that you could probably attest to, too, being in the ministry that we are, talking with women who, I don't want to say are falling on a regular basis, but are falling often, and
Right.
speaking through it, that I often come to the question of, like, what's different between me and them?
Every day.
You said, we are constantly coming back to our own poverty. And the only answer that I have is that I have somehow meaning by the grace of God, I have somehow said no at this point in my life more than they have. I've experienced the same temptations. I've experienced the same lies. Mm-hmm. And there are still times I let some things get to me more than others. But recognizing I constantly am my own poverty because of these conversations, and constantly being humbled into saying, I've been so blessed that I've been able to say no more times. And my prayer is that these women that I'm walking with will say no. So I loved your word about us being, my hope, but there's really not a difference between us.
No.
We the same and emptiness, and how much we need the Lord.
I love that you said that too, because and you and I are blessed to be the only ones in the organization who read the forms submitted, right? So for those who are listening, Annie and I are the Yep, the source of the confidential nature, right, of what we do. So we read the intake forms. Chiefly Annie does, but I read some as well. But I still read them, even though that's chiefly your job. I still read them because, number one, it's a reminder of like, this ministry is needed, so, keep going. And then two, I see myself in every single form. No matter the gravity of what's going on, no matter the situation, age, location, whatever of each woman, I see myself in my own story in each form where I'm like, oh, yep, I know you. Hello. And I think we have to come from that perspective. And when we're talking to women in relapse or when you're a woman in recovery, like there has to be that tone of like, oh, I know you so well. Welcome, sister. Like, hello.
Yeah.
Like some of my favorite conversations, I guess we'll get to protections in a second, but some of my favorite conversations that I get to have are with women after I give a talk. So I get to have one-on-ones. And I've been to a few different college campuses to give talks this year. And for one of them, at the University of Marion in North Dakota, I was up till like 12:30 having one-on-ones with women, and I just, oh my gosh, it's such a gift. They're so beautiful. Like, and that's, I like exist, I think, for those conversations.
Yeah.
But just like, yeah, if we can take that tone of like invitation and welcoming of like I do not have all the answers. Like I don't. Like we run this ministry, right? Like we're doing our best. We like to joke that we're building the plane as we fly it, right? Like we're doing our very best, and perhaps we factually know some answers, but like I do not have all the answers. What I have is open arms, and what I have is understanding of like, I know you. I see your face. Like, hello. Like there's so much to you, and I think speaking that over people, no matter where they're at in their journey, but especially in relapse, because I've had a few women speak to me like, I just relapsed. And it's like, oh, hey, I know you. And then almost having a lightheartedness of like, porn sucks, doesn't it? Like, don't you just hate how much you love it? Like, that's the worst, and just kind of like this humor of like, I've got your back. Like, not, it's cool, but like, it's going to be okay, and that embrace and that lightheartedness. I don't know. And I'm not connecting that dot super well, but I just, I love the feeling of solidarity that we get to have with women. That it's not I've achieved level 10, you're at level 3. It's just like, no, we're all just women trying to love Jesus, staying like, and it's just so hard. And porn is so tempting. It stinks. Like I'm just, yeah. So I love the solidarity instead of the competition. Always, always, always.
And I think some of the power in is that's sort of, in a sense, how the Lord sees us. Not that he's in solidarity with our sin, but I think of the story of the woman caught in adultery. Jesus is not surprised or alarmed, right? That a woman who, if she was just caught in adultery, she's probably completely naked, being dragged out into the street. All of these people about to stone her to death. And you know what Jesus is doing? He's busy writing in the sand.
He's like, whatever.
Something, there's a funny nature to like, I've heard this one before. He's not surprised by sin. And yet, to get back to another, I'll say, area of protection, is that story of how Jesus responded to the woman. Did anyone else condemn you? She says no. And he said, neither do I, even though he was the one. And he said, sin no more. And so I think a beautiful area of protection is remembering God's mercy for us and what he actually says, and not lies that we believe, not the lies of I should be better, I should have prayed harder, I'm smarter than this.
Right.
Why not just recognize, nope, I'm super weak. Where's the Pauls of the world who boast in their own weakness? I know I am not one, but I try to be one. and recognizing exactly how the Lord is looking at me. And so easily good protective measure is speaking words of truth over yourself, whether
Yes, amen.
you through the Bible, whether you need a friend to speak into you, your accountability partner, please go to confession and allow the holy priests of the world to just love you. The amount of times, also, most priests, no, every priest that I have ever been to that I have asked to hug me after confession will do it.
That is awesome.
So ask for a hug from your neighborhood priest. It's so healing, especially when you're crying. I think that's my favorite part is I'll be crying. They'll absolve me of my sins, and I'll be like, "Hi, Father, can you hug me?" And he's so shook. He's like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah," and he'll
That
just
is
like hold.
awesome.
So go hug your neighbor and receive the mercy of the Lord. So yeah, Jesus's mercy. Do you have anything you want to say to that, Rachel?
I'm kind of like distracted by the fact that you hug priests after confession. That's brilliant.
Always
I've
do.
never done that. I totally want to do it. My spiritual director in college, who is this like lovely, gentle Franciscan friar at Ave Maria. He's like, I think he's from Boston originally, but this big Italian family. So just this Italian Franciscan. And he just knocked me down about 10 notches, which I just needed over the course of those 2 years. Like such a lovely soul. But one thing he would do when he would absolve me was like, he would be like, I need your head. Because I would always lean back, like when I was being absolved. Like I just said from the mic, I would always lean back. And he would be like, give me your head. And so he would lean forward because we would do face to face, and he would like just gently place his hand on my forehead. And then right after would like bless me. And that was such a, yeah, I maybe I should have hugged him. Sometimes he did hug me, but not necessarily after confession, but maybe I should have asked for a hug. But that touch, that fatherly touch, it was really beautiful because he wanted to give that. And I remember going to him during COVID, at his house, like on his back porch. He would still receive students for spiritual direction when I was in grad school. And even during COVID, when everybody was freaking out, he's like, I need your head. I was like, are you sure? And he goes, are you kidding me? I live for this. He's like, give me your head. I was like, okay. Like, he just didn't care. He's like, whatever. I don't care about touching people. I loved it. Yeah, I agree that there's the choice you have when you relapse between, okay, I can either continue, or I can either go back to the pattern of shame, that voice that I know so well and I'm so familiar with, or I can choose something different. And there's like a responsibility that we have to take for our actions, right? Like in order to recover, you have to recognize you are responsible for the times you've engaged in sinful behavior. But you're not responsible for the woundedness that causes it, or like the, exterior circumstances you're caught in. What you're responsible for is the choice. And so in that moment, you're responsible for choosing the truth. And yeah, and you have a very, very clear, obvious, like two roads there. So yes, I highly affirm and encourage hugging your neighborhood priest, like Annie says, but also just finding a way to like communicate the truth to yourself or receive that communication from the Lord. One psalm that I found particularly healing was Psalm 139, and it's at the center of our Magdala curriculum now, just because it's been healing for many women that I've encountered on the road to recovery. But just going back to like, Lord, you search me and you know me. Like, when I sit and I stand, you know what I just did, or you know what I'm falling into. And yet I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And you've knit me in my mother's womb. You created me with a purpose. Okay. Like I can head back to that now. I think one protection that I kind of, and perhaps this is just responsibility, kind of delved deeper into, taking responsibility, I do believe protects you from further relapse. Just because it's this, I guess it's an honesty with yourself, and we'll get into honesty more later, but it's also just like, becoming your own accountability partner, I think is a really good part of recovery. But I guess it's this, I want to unpack this thought. This is pregnancy brain. it's this feeling of like, okay, I'm going back. I feel like I'm back at the beginning, right? I feel like I'm back at the beginning, which you're not. That's one of the lies of relapse. If we want to debunk myths of relapse, like it's what I told you earlier, the analogy of Henry Nouwen's, like when you relapse, you are driving a car on the road and you run your car off the road. And when you get back on the road, you're not starting out at the beginning of the road. You're back where you were, where you drove off. And so what you've gained. And so the strength and the virtue and the grace that you've received is still there for you. And you get to take that into your response to your relapse. But taking responsibility means like, I feel like I'm back at the beginning. And so I'm going to ask myself, if I can go back to my first exposure, or the first time I remember giving in to a sexual sin, what would I do differently? Because now's my chance. Like, what would I do differently afterward? Would I go back again the next day, or would I say no? And that can almost be like a restorative experience. When I went through a pretty intense round of therapy after graduation from college, my therapist relied heavily on a traumatologist named Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. It's a pretty like pivotal book on trauma. But he would encourage forms of therapy where you would go back into traumatic memories and quite literally, like as you're recounting the memory in your head, act out physically what you would have done in the moment that you didn't get to do. So if you're being assaulted, push the person away or run, or, just and be an adult now and respond as you would at whatever age you were. And that was very healing for me to work through some of my traumatic memories, but you almost get to do that in relapse of like, I get to close the computer now because I'm an adult. Like, I'm not the 13-year-old girl anymore that fell into this the first time and believed the lies of Satan about her. I get to close my laptop now and I get to go pray and go receive the sacrament of reconciliation and start again. That's what I get to do. So there's this empowerment in taking responsibility, and then taking responsibility for your response afterward. I don't know if that's making sense, but I found that to be very protective for me. I'm responsible for what I've done, yes, but I can respond to it as the person I am now and not the person I was even 6 months ago,
I think there's something powerful in always recognizing that we do have a choice, right? The hard part of addiction is when you get so far deep into something, there comes a point where you lose that choice, right? That something has taken control over you. But after you have just relapsed, you are now given the choice of how to respond.
Yes.
Once you, like, in the moment of, like, when you're actually relapsing, you are sort of out of control of yourself. You don't have your choice. Yeah. But it's this moment right after that you do have a choice. And so this is your moment of hope and empowerment. I get to choose otherwise, that I'm stronger than I was, that I have X amount of, even if it's days that I've been trying to do better, hopefully by this point, I might have a better sense of reflection, meaning like I can now put into words saying, I relapsed because I was feeling lonely. I was out of control.
Yep.
You might have better language. And so now you can use it to actually make a choice and move forward. I also just want to highlight that I think there is a beautiful place for mourning that can exist too. To take a moment of sorrow to say, dang it, I really wanted to be better. Dang it. I lost, I'll say in my life, in some major relapses, I ended up losing, I'll say, a week of my life that I'm trying to get my mental self back to normal. That took mourning to recognize, like, okay, I'm not going to be full of this week or this day or whatever it takes. And so I think there's a place for that, for Jesus to weep with us. But in each moment of weeping, I got to come out, make a choice again to say, okay, that hurt. Kelly Clarkson, what doesn't kill ya makes you stronger. Think it out, everybody. But I think there's truth in that even within the morning, there's power in choice. And the now given you the chance to say no to sin again and to say yes back to the beautiful plan that he has for your life. And even if you can just slightly say yes for the next 10 minutes, if I can choose for the next 10 minutes to be on the right path, great. Then choose 10 minutes after that. Then the next hour. Choose closing your laptop. The small things right after are the biggest victory. Like celebrate hard when you say no for the first time after a relapse again. But yeah, there's power in that choice after.
I love that. And I think celebration, I like that you said celebrate too. This is just good for recovery, but it is especially good after relapse, like when you get yourself back on the road again. I had a few girls in our Pure in Heart group at Ave when they would hit a certain milestone, and everybody's milestone was, different, or there was different significance for everybody, right? Like, I've made it 2 months, or I just hit a year. I would always Venmo them for money for ice cream or wine or, whatever. Like, and I would always, do a really hilarious Venmo message, obviously private. I'm like, go get yourself a glass of wine in your porn-free life. Woohoo. Like, and just kind of like, wah! But there's something about that though. Again, that kind of, that lightheartedness, that joy, not writing yourself off, not like, oh, it's, it's cool, not being casual about something, but like, no, like you just hit a major milestone. You got back after a relapse. Yeah, go get yourself a Chick-fil-A milkshake. I don't know. That's what I do for celebrations now, is Chick-fil-A milkshakes. Celebrations of any kind. But I love that. The idea of mourning and then celebration, that's the Christian life is, periods of sorrow and periods of joy. So tapping into that in our recovery. Also, a side note, did you know that the "What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Stronger" is originally from Friedrich Nietzsche? Did you know that?
No.
I didn't know this until this week. I was like this week years old when I discovered. I was like, wait a second. Obviously, I knew that statement did not come from Kelly Clarkson. But the fact that Kelly Clarkson popularized a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche is not something, it's not a combo I ever saw coming. I'm just going to be honest. Anyway, total side note. Fun facts.
I will continue to quote Kelly Clarkson, though, so I apologize to the guy that you just named that I will probably...
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah,
famous philosopher. Interesting fellow. Did a lot of interesting things. Any philosophy nerd listening right now is like, okay, that's quite the summary. But anyway, we don't have time for him right now. I think, I want to talk about honesty too as protection. I think this is huge. There's a ton of like research on radical honesty, and radical honesty is a concept within the 12-step recovery groups. They use it. Some practices of psychology and psychiatry use it. But just that in addiction, we develop this lying habit, right? And I want to do an entire episode on this, but just even looking back on my time of very, very active addiction, I was also incredibly caught up in deception in areas outside of just sexuality, right? Like you end up just lying a lot. That's a very common, almost side effect of addiction, is like just becoming quite the deceiver, because you start with just covering up your behaviors that you don't want anybody to discover. And then it kind of just snowballs into just, I can cover up anything I want. Like I can make up anything I want. So in relapse, we're tempted to hide it, right? We're tempted to go back into that hiding, especially because we're afraid of people's opinions of us. And I've wondered, like, if I relapsed, which is a possibility. I am a human, right? If I relapsed now, would my credibility be taken away, in any sort of, like, in this ministry? And it's like, I think the people who really understand how these things work, number one, is their credibility to take away? Number two, they wouldn't care, It's like, so it's just, you have to, I guess you have to be ready to be transparent and not go back into that place of lying and that place of pretending like you have it all together. That's why I appreciate you being honest even about habits you had a year ago, you know, or things you fell into a year ago. It's like, yeah, that, I mean, could be a year ago, could be today. Like we never know. And we just can only pray for the grace of God to preserve us and be ready, you know, have those preparations in place. But I think being honest, whether with one people or hundreds, you know, or your 12-step group or your Magdala support group or whatever, if you have a relapse is key. Even recently, I was watching a show and it was one of those, like, I mean, I was watching Parenthood, you know, like did you ever see Parenthood? I think it's an ABC show.
Yeah.
Fairly clean, right? Like somewhat secular values, but fairly clean show. And one of their episodes in the season I was watching the other day opened on a sex scene, like pretty obviously too. And I was like, oh shit, like, like why is this happening? Right. And it flashed on the screen and I was immediately, by the grace of God, able to fast forward, right, and just skip it. And so I know I was not guilty of engaging with anything, but I still told my husband about it later. I was like, hey, by the way, I just want you to know this happened, because for me, that's protecting me. Like the fact that I told my husband that I saw this and he was like, yeah, you're not guilty of anything. Thank you for fast forwarding. Like, good for you. The fact that I had that moment of honesty with him is going to protect me from fantasizing about that scene potentially later. Or if it comes to my memory, it's like, oh, I've already been honest about this. I don't need to think about it anymore. Like, it's out there, it's gone. So there's a power in telling. It's when you kind of not take control, but you take ownership and you take the power back from a moment, I guess. That's many thoughts strung into one. But what do you have to say about honesty, Annie?
I think honesty is, I love that you're drinking a Chick-fil-A milkshake during this, because I'm craving one.
I'm sorry. No, I just, you know, my baby needed a milkshake.
I take joy in your milkshake. That's me being honest right now.
Thanks, dude.
But I think honesty, especially in relapse, is a sense of your own coming to terms with, so then you can do something about it, right? Yeah. I think of, like, if you physically hide something under a rug, if you physically, like, your dirty clothes in a closet, you don't see it, you don't have to think about it, but then guess what? Your laundry doesn't get done, right? You know?
Yeah.
So if you're actually desiring freedom, if you keep hiding from the thing that's keeping you from freedom, guess what? You'll never actually be free. I say that with mercy, grace, and compassion, and recognizing how hard it is to even be honest with yourself, yes, to be honest with the Lord in prayer, to be honest at confession. And I know you've talked about this many times, but being honest, and instead of just saying, like, some sexual sin, blah, 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 and keep talking, but to use the word pornography in confession, to be very clear and precise in what happened, you know, to be honest with an accountability partner, a friend, whatever it looks like. The more you are able to be honest, the more that you are able to actually choose otherwise. I just talked about having a choice for forever. If you're not looking at the thing you have a choice about because you're trying to ignore it, then guess what? You lose your choice because you can't even make one. And part of honesty, if you want to move forward, you have to be honest in some way, you know? Or never forget that the honesty that you have with yourself is that, yes, I'm broken, but the Lord loves me despite all that, right? And recognizing in my honesty that I'm not defined by me falling right now. I'm defined by being a daughter. But I can only come to that realization when I first see that I need to be an adopted child. Otherwise, yes, I can't get it, you know? And so that's a huge place to start. Yeah.
I completely agree. I'm thinking of this comparison that I'm reading this book right now where the author makes a comparison about Homer's Odyssey, you know, and Odysseus traveling through with his ship, like through the sirens, right?
Yeah.
And how he asks to be tied to the mast instead of stopping up his ears, right? Because you're supposed to stop up your ears against the sirens.
Right.
But the only person who can kill the sirens is a person who has made it through their temptation and lived to tell the tale, right? Yep. So the author makes this awesome comparison about like radical honesty and the Odyssey, but just saying like the slaying is in the telling. It's not in the making it through per se, right? Making it through doesn't matter if you don't tell, right? But the slaying's in the telling is like, whether or not you make it through that moment without completely giving into the sirens or whatever. Like there's, in Homer's The Odyssey, if he gives into the sirens, he's dead, but there's that anyway. But the slaying's in the telling, like the killing of the thing is in the telling. That's when you seriously take it back. And actually how it dies is only those continual moments of making it through, of, giving in or not giving in or giving in at different levels or whatever, and just getting through to the other side. But I also like that significance of him asking to be tied to the mast, of like knowing what he's about to go through and being prepared. And I can think of many different moments. This is another protection of just throughout college or beyond, or just even in my relationship with my husband, throughout engagement in particular, where I could just tell that temptations were going to be heightened for whatever reason, my cycle being one of them. That's such a huge one for women. Ew, my word. But just being honest with friends or with him and just saying, yeah, I'm about to be ovulating. Can you pray for me? Because this is going to be a more difficult phase. And so there's many ways that we can ask in a way to be like tied to our own mast and like be prepared of like, I don't want to give in, but I very well might. Could you pray for me, please? And even that honesty beforehand, I've found ended up being a protection for me of like, I have people who know, I have people who know and have my back. That's such a fruitful thing to be doing with accountability partners or with a support group, is asking for those protections beforehand, asking, or exposing yourself in honesty beforehand and being transparent about what's going to be tempting for you, whether that's a person you're dating or a situation you're entering into or your cycle or whatever it might be. Or, hey, I'm just super stressed out this week. I'm anticipating a lot of temptation. Being honest beforehand, when those moments come, then you remember like, oh, wait, I already spoke the truth about this, that this is not going to satisfy me and that this is a temptation and I can say no. The end, So I think even honesty works. I guess it works on both ends of a moment. That's my final thought on honesty, I think. My brain is so scattered today.
You're doing good.
Thanks,
good.
buddy.
Thing I wanted to add to that is it then also creates, when you are honest with another person, it creates an opportunity for them to love you more, right?
Yes,
like if
amen.
You're to me and saying this week's going to be really hard for me for X, Y, and Z reasons, that
right.
The opportunity as a friend to reach out in a week and say, Rachel, how are you feeling? And you know how nice it feels to be checked in on by a friend? I had reach out to me that I told weeks ago that I would not be free to hang out until April started. And so she reached out to me today and she's like, I know it's about to be the time where you're free. Can we hang out next week? Oh, Rachel, my heart melted.
Yeah.
Still wanted to hang out with me. But it gives the same space for you are now giving your friends, your significant other, anyone an invitation to love you better. And then for you to receive that, right? It comes back to asking for help is not you being weak. That's actually one of your moments. So even just asking for a prayer. Oh, I get so excited when one of my Magdala girls will just text me randomly, hey, today's sort of hard. And I'll be like, thanks so much for reaching out. I love you so much. It's such a beautiful strength of, I am so weak right now. Somebody come to help. And the least I can do is say, come Holy Spirit, be with insert name, So it creates an opportunity to love. It creates a stronger bond between the you're with. It shows you that you're not alone in the struggle. Even if you're sharing with someone who doesn't have that struggle, it means you're not alone because they're fighting with you.
Yes.
There's just many additional things that come from that moment of honesty and that powerful choice.
I know. I think I feel like a mom when when Magdala girls reach out to me for prayer. You're like, yes, child, I want to get you that cookie. I do. You know,
Yeah.
it taps into the maternal side that we all have. I feel like entire groups respond to women that way when they reach out for prayers. It's like the whole group turns into a collective mom that just surrounds this sweet child that we all are. I think practically speaking, when it comes to speaking the truth over yourself too, or recognizing poverty, or being honest, or, you know, all of these different things, asking for help. One of the ones that I'm thinking of, and perhaps it's just a clarification of what I said earlier, is blessing your body and what it's capable of, right? I think I want to correct, you know, any misunderstanding that it's like you have to be married in order to experience blessing in your sexuality, or you have to be pregnant or have a child in order to experience the life-giving, life-creating capabilities of your sexuality. I think something in Relapse that's beautiful and helpful is turning your eyes towards what is my sexuality for and how do I see that right now. And right now, for me, it is being a wife and mother, but what is it for you? You know, like, what is it for you in any state of life? And like, I can bless my body because I'm able to embrace the people I love. I can bless my body because I'm an athlete. I'm able to run. I'm able to lift weights. I'm able to do whatever. I'm able to glorify God through my health. Like, awesome. You know, just finding, I'm able to kneel and pray and worship and raise my hands. I'm able to do, I can receive the Eucharist because I have a body. I think post-relapse, looking or turning our attention towards, what are the beautiful unitive and life-giving capabilities of my sexuality in my state in life, where I am right now. I think that turns your focus from your own sin and your own depravity towards what is the goal, right? Which is, for all of us, it's to be in union with God and to, you know, bear life in whatever capacity we're called to do so. But Edith Stein says, like, pretty clearly, she's like, every single woman is called to be a wife and mother. Every single one. Like, doesn't matter how. No need to compare who becomes what in what way, when, right? Everyone's called for to be in this spousal union with God and possibly with a man, and to bear life, whether biologically or spiritually. Like, and praise be Jesus Christ for that our feminine sexuality is made that way. I love that. So turning your attention towards what your body, what your mind, what your soul is ordered to, that helps a ton. So even practically, just like, I'm going to go live out positive feminine sexuality today. I'm going to go hang out with my friends. I'm going to go love them intentionally. Be affectionate with the people I love, you know, don't hide myself away. I think that's important post-relapse.
I think something that you just shared, I want to hit on too, you know, the feminine call to bear life. I think one of the most healing calls that we can come back to after a fall. So I at Mass, I veil, you know, so if I ever see little kids and they ask about it and like I explain it to them, you know, it's because the sacred things at Mass are also veiled, and the things that are veiled at Mass are the things that bear life. The tabernacle bears life of Christ, you know, like the chalice bears life of blood of Christ. And so recognizing that I, as a woman, am sacred and that I have a call to bear life. So for me, that's a reminder every time I go to Mass that I have this reminder. But I think that's a beautiful, I'll say practical tip too, of post-relapse, coming back to your identity of bearing life. And I think one of my continuous greatest moments of freedom is when I am in places where I am bringing new life to the world, whether that's through horrendous humor that somehow my softball team laughs at, you know, donating cans to a food drive, whether it's being very intentional and listening to a best friend of mine. Right. When I am bringing life into the world, I remember my identity is good, and I'm making a choice to move forward in that identity versus the lying identity that says I'm not good enough, all this
Yeah.
stuff that I experienced because of a relapse. So I think that's actually a practical tip. Another practical thing I think I want to end with is taking a step forward um, after recognizing, right? So asking the questions, why did I fall? What was I actually seeking?
Yeah.
And then being able to take a step forward in that, make a choice in that. So, for examples in my own life, a lot of it had to do with I was looking for control in some way.
Mm-hmm.
That I then woke up the next day, I would mimic that in some way in seeking control in a good, healthy habit. I love to braid hair. So that was something that a week after a fall, I would braid my hair every day. Why? Because I get to take control of my body again, take control of my hair, put it backwards so it's not like in my face all day, and taking control of my vision throughout the day. Another example of taking control is I never make my bed. So
Mm-hmm.
taking control to make every day, to feel more organized, whatever that is. I think another trigger in my life, or when I would fall, it would usually be correlated to with all sorts of, I'll say, body insecurity and feeling undesired.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for the next few days, be intentional in dressing myself in my favorite outfits,
Yeah.
in making sure I get enough time to shower, that I'm in good hygiene, things like this to remind me of the goodness of me in these places that felt wounded, so that I can move forward in making a choice to combat the lies. I think practically we have to come back to what was our why that we fell and allow the Lord to fight for us there. You know, don't fall into the lie that that is what you are, that you're ugly, that your body sucks, whatever. Fight the lie with the truth that the Lord gave you, that you are good, that you're strong, that you are beautiful, that you're healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's your advantage. The sword. The Lord's giving you these so that you can be victorious in Him. And so allowing yourself to take control of those things.
I love that. Yeah, the practical taking control instead of seeking control in an area where we shouldn't. I think I had one more practical, but it has completely slipped my brain now. So here I am. we can wind down. But yeah, I think in conclusion, just I think the name of the game in Relapse is mercy.
Yeah.
And there's so many quotes from Saint Faustina's diary that are so beautiful, but one of the main ones is like just Jesus, speaking to Saint Faustina and saying like, why are you discouraged? Like, why are you discouraged? My mercy's here. Like, I'm here. And I think that's the name of the game when you're in relapse, is just mercy. Like, sometimes I actually sit and think, because I'm not a merciful person on myself or other people, which is, something sad, but a space that I get to work with the Lord more on. But sometimes I do actually sit and contemplate, like, there is an unfathomable ocean of mercy waiting on us, right? Like, it is incomprehensible how much mercy, just mercy, the Lord has on our souls. And just that you don't have to wait to experience that. Like, the mercy is contingent on us being sinners. It's contingent on us needing help. It's not there for the perfect. So just, yeah, I think addicts have a special privilege in a way of getting to experience God's mercy. But that doesn't change in relapse. Like that's the same in relapse. Is like and I've said this several times, much to the shock of some people that have heard me say this, but I don't regret being a porn addict, right? Like, I don't have this regret. Maybe you and I have spoken about this before.
Yeah.
I don't have a regret, because without it, like, how would I know Jesus the way I do?
Yeah.
And I think when you can look at relapse that way, again, without giving yourself excuses, but taking responsibility and doing your best to rectify the situation, but going, wow, how would I know Jesus if I didn't have that relapse? How would I know Jesus as well as I do today? And yeah, turning the experience around into an opportunity to kind of dive into that ocean of mercy. Yeah, I think number one, it makes Satan very angry because he can't like do anything with you after that. But also, yeah, you just get to know Jesus better, and who doesn't want that? So,
I love that. And
yeah,
I was reminded of when Jesus said, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do.
I know.
And spend all my days now as a dietetic intern in a hospital. So I'm constantly seeing this. Today I got to visit a retired nurse, and she spent her whole life serving the sick people. And it was constantly reminding her that today there are people that are looking after you. And so in all these moments of, I'll say, sickness, of
Yeah.
relapse, it's a place that we get to come back to and be served and loved by others, which is in our nature. Our nature is to receive love from the Lord. So it brings us back to our nature. Healthy people don't need a doctor, but sick people do. Rachel, I don't know about you, but I'm proud to be sick.
Yes.
So,
I am
Lord, come.
a sick individual. That is me. Yeah, and just that the Lord, yeah, the Lord knows how distracted we get. The Lord, I was reading in a book earlier by Jacques Philippe about how the point of prayer is to keep a recollected heart, not necessarily a recollected brain. And we always focus on having the recollected brain, right? Like I have to focus completely. And he's like, actually human attention, like now, he doesn't say this, but now scientists say that we have the attention span of a goldfish, right? Like humans have a very short attention span because of what we've done to our brains with too much technology and information coming our way. So the point is not to focus our attention, is to focus our heart, and how we can still have a focused heart when we deviate. We can refocus, recollect ourselves. The point is to get your heart back in the right place, and then your brain. And it's the same in recovery, is get your heart back in the right place. What do you need to do in order to do that? And that's not impossible or even that difficult to do. The Lord gives you everything you need to do that. I think of, I was thinking of this beforehand when I was praying about this episode. In John's gospel, when Jesus has resurrected, right, appeared to the apostles, been like, Thomas, don't doubt me, yada, yada, yada. And then disappears. He disappears. And the apostles like don't see the resurrected Lord for a little while. And there's this beautiful and like so incredibly human line from Peter, right, who always gives us humanity in such a radical way. He just says, I'm going fishing. Like finally he's so defeated that he returns to his old way of life, right? He returns to being just a fisherman when he's been an apostle for how many years at this point, right? In the, head honcho of the apostles. So the Lord understands that we have these old comforts that we turn to. And then he still appears on the shore when they're out in the boat, and, a bunch of the apostles go with Peter. And then John points out on the shore, he's like, that's the Lord. And Peter immediately jumps out of the boat and dives into the water and swims towards Jesus. And that is so beautiful. Like that, when I first understood what that passage was, I just wept, because I was like, this is me. Also, this is relapse. It's like, you got back in the old boat, kiddo. Like you forgot your head honcho of the apostles. Like you forgot that Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, has come into your life and given you a different call. And so you went back to the old one because it was comfortable. And I'm sorry, but he's on the shore. So get out and swim your butt off towards him. That's what you do. And so just the willingness of Peter to just throw off his garments, jump in the water, and just swim, like that's how we should respond to relapse. Don't stay in the boat. The boat's not for you. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's beautiful. Rachel, my for you, if there's someone listening right now and they just relapse, let's say today, yesterday, what's your word for them?
First, that I love you. Oh, I love you. I think second, what's coming to mind is that I'm just so excited to hear your story. If you're relapsing over and over again, if you're discouraged, or if you just had a relapse for the first time in a long time, I'm so excited to see what God is doing with your story, man. It wouldn't be so hard if it wasn't going to be so glorious. So for anybody who's caught in that period of relapse, goodness gracious, I have so much hope like for you, because if there's hope for me, there's hope for anyone. So that's what I think of. It's just, I'm so excited to see what God does with all these relapsers. Oh man. What would you say, Annie?
That was so good. Could we just take a moment for that word? That was good. Mine would be, I think you are steps closer to freedom than you were before. I don't have all the logic to put that into words, but I know that we were talking about Psalm 91 before. It literally harm will overtake you. Nothing will harm you. God doesn't mean some things. He means nothing. And so, yeah, you fell down. Yeah, you struck out. Yeah, you grounded out. I'll use all the soft imagery, but the Lord's not mad. The Lord's excited to welcome you back home. You can be the prodigal son every single day. The Lord's going to keep throwing you a feast. When I talk with kids, I talk about feast imagery as in like the Lord's going to give me all the unlimited Olive Garden breadsticks like all the time. That means that if you just relapse, the Lord has a full table of Olive Garden breadsticks for you, like ready on command, a robe, a ring, and sandals. And you're one step closer to freedom than you were before. So congrats. And also, welcome to the club. You're not alone.
I know. Yeah. Always. Basically every podcast episode we record on any topic ever. Yes. Welcome to the club. Honestly, I think we're a motley crew. I think we're fun.
We're a good crew. We get Chick-fil-A.
I think for women who hesitate to join Magdala, I would love for you to get to see a Magdala leadership team small group, because leadership team meeting. Sorry, not small group. We don't have a small group, though maybe we should. Who knows? I laugh so hard every damn meeting. Like I just these are the funniest women. So we have fun, you know. We have fun on the road to recovery. But anywho, thank you for joining us, Annie, or joining me. I guess joining us. Joining us. Me and the human I am growing. And yes, I ask for the prayers of our listeners and patrons for my growing family, and for Annie as she finishes her master's. Oof. And like, just, I remember the grind of writing my master's thesis, and I was just, I don't think I was a full person. And then when I was done, I just remember like sitting after my defense, like sitting in a chair on my porch, just weeping. Cause I was like, it's over. And I was like kind of sad, but also just, holy cow, what a feat. So I hope you have a chair on your porch ready to receive your weeping once your master's is done, because it is hard earned. And if you liked this episode, subscribe, share it, give us a like. Heck, give us a thumbs up. Those help us out. Or just if you have any encouragement for those in relapse, leave it in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you are interested in joining a small group, you can find the link in the show description. We are also always looking for women to be moderators of our small groups. So if you feel the itch, the call, the inclination that perhaps you should lead a small group, the answer is yes, you probably should. So reach out to us because we'd love to chat with you. You can do that through the same link in the show description to join a group. So it's the same form. And just check off that you'd like to volunteer as a moderator. For those of you who'd like to get access to more content and more community, feel free to join us on Patreon. That's also how Magdala's expenses are covered. So thank you to our patrons for financially supporting all of these feats and this plane that we are building as we fly it. So we thank you for joining us. But if you'd like more exclusive content, feel free to join us over there. And if you are interested in Covenant Eyes, which is a good practical protection for future relapse, because it requires your honesty, not necessarily prevention. So if you're interested in Covenant Eyes, you can use the code Magdala for 30 days free. But We genuinely love you all out there, especially you women struggling with sexual sin. You're very near and dear to our hearts, and you're in our daily prayers. But we will catch you on the flip side. Peace out. Thanks for joining the conversation today on the Magdala podcast. If you want to learn more, join a support group with other women on the journey, or find more content, visit magdalaministries.org. If you want to continue to be a part of the conversation, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. But most importantly, wherever you are in the journey of healing, know that you're not alone and you don't have to hide anymore. We're excited to welcome you to the table next time. God bless.